At my baby's funeral, he leaned in close, smoothed the lapel of his expensive black suit, and said, "You can always get pregnant again." I looked down at the tiny white coffin in front of us. It wasn't even long enough for a full bouquet. My hands were shaking, but not from the cold. Next to him, his mother nodded. "Next time, try harder," she said softly, like it was helpful advice. As if Mira had been a failed exam I could retake. I said nothing. My throat felt swollen, not from grief. Grief had long since turned into something sharper. My silence wasn't surrender, it was calculation. I sat perfectly still, clutching the only photo I had left of my daughter. It was taken 2 weeks before she died. She was wrapped in a yellow blanket, asleep on my chest, her tiny fist curled near her chin. You could see her smile if you looked close. Not a wide one. Just enough to make you believe in something again. I kept my fingers pressed to the photo like I could still feel her heartbeat through the paper. They thought I was broken. His mother glanced over at me with pity disguised as superiority, the kind people wear like perfume. He looked bored, tapping his foot during the priest's prayer. The man who said he loved me, who swore he wanted a family, was waiting for it to be over so he could get back to whatever came next. But I wasn't empty. Not anymore. I stood slowly. Not one person in that church expected it. Not Darren, not Catherine, not the woman behind me who had been crying louder than I had all morning. I walked toward him and held out the small white box I'd been gripping under the pew. He frowned. "What is this?" I didn't answer. I just held it out. He took it, glancing at it like it was an unwanted gift. He opened the lid. First, the printed text messages. He squinted at the top one. I watched the change in his face when he realized what they were. Then came the drug test, his name in bold, the results clear. The police report sat at the bottom, stapled neatly, with 2 photos clipped to the back. Mira's bruises. The ones he said were nothing. The ones he said I imagined. He looked up at me, and I turned away. I walked down the aisle, past the flowers, past the pews of people too stunned to speak, past the coffin where my daughter lay. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. By that night, the box was in police hands. By the end of the week, he was in custody. And now? Prison doesn't allow visitors. I never planned to go anyway. Before Mira, I was someone who filled her quiet with noise. I worked overtime as a pediatric nurse, volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends, and listened to podcasts while folding laundry. Silence made me uncomfortable, like it meant I wasn't doing enough. Then I got pregnant and everything changed. The silence stopped feeling empty. It started to feel full. I found out I was expecting on a rainy Wednesday in November. I remember because the test strip slipped out of my shaking hands and landed on the cold tile floor. I sat there barefoot, staring at the 2 pink lines until my knees hurt. I told Darren that night at dinner. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at the lasagna I had made from scratch, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. Then he smiled slowly, like he was trying it on. "Guess we're really doing this," he said. It wasn't exactly the reaction I had dreamed of, but I took what I could get. We had been together for 4 years. The first 2 were full of promise. He made me feel seen. He bought flowers, remembered birthdays, kissed my forehead in the middle of crowded grocery stores. But after we moved in together, things shifted. He got quieter, more impatient. Little things started to bother him. My shoes near the door, dishes left in the sink. He said I was too sensitive when I cried, too emotional when I cared. Still, I wanted a family. And I thought maybe this baby would bring us back to who we used to be. So I gave him room to grow into the role, told myself some men just need time to adjust. Pregnancy was hard on me. Morning sickness hit like a train. My feet swelled. I had to stop working earlier than I planned. Darren grew more distant with every ultrasound. He missed 2 appointments because of client emergencies, and when he did come, he spent most of the time on his phone. When I asked him if he was scared, he shrugged. "She's not even here yet," he said. Why stress about it? I wanted him to feel what I felt, to hear her heartbeat and have it rearrange something in his soul, but it didn't, at least not for him. Mira was born in early August during one of the hottest weeks of the summer. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and peach lotion. She came fast, barely 4 hours of labor, and when they placed her on my chest, I couldn't stop crying. Her skin was warm and she blinked at me like she already knew who I was. Yvonne, my mom, visited the next morning with a stuffed lamb and a plate of homemade cookies. She cried when she held Mira, rocking gently, whispering, "You're safe now, little one. You've got your mama's heart." Darren walked in 10 minutes later, carrying a coffee for himself and none for me. He snapped a few photos of Mira on his phone, muttered something about how she had my nose, and left after 20 minutes, said he had paperwork to finish. The first few weeks at home were quiet and golden. Mira slept on my chest, hiccuped in her sleep, made little cooing sounds like a dove. I took pictures every day, her first smile, her yawns, her reaching for my face with tiny fingers. Darren wasn't around much. He came home late. He said the baby's crying kept him up, so he slept in the guest room. When I told him I needed more help, he said, "You wanted this. I'm providing for us." My mom started coming over more. She helped with feedings and rocked Mira while I showered. Some days, I cried for no reason. My body ached in ways I hadn't expected. My love for Mira was overwhelming, but I felt invisible next to her, like I had vanished into the role of mother, and Darren didn't see me anymore. One night, Mira had a fever. I called Darren from the hallway, panic rising in my chest. "She's burning up," I said. He sighed into the phone. "Did you give her Tylenol?" "She's 7 weeks old. She can't take Tylenol." He didn't come home that night. I ended up taking Mira to urgent care alone. It turned out to be nothing, just a heat rash, but that night stayed with me. Not because of the rash, because of the silence from him, because of how long I sat in the car crying after we got home. I started noticing things, the way Darren held her awkwardly like she was made of glass and inconvenience, the way he avoided her cries, left the room, turned up the TV. When I asked him once if he wanted to do bath time, he looked at me like I'd asked him to clean a sewer. "I'm not good at that stuff," he said. "Let her bond with you." That was his answer for everything. Let her bond with me. Let her need me more. Let me carry it all. I tried not to let it break me. I sang to Mira, wrote letters to her I never sent, whispered promises while she slept on my chest. I didn't know then that love wouldn't be enough to protect her. I thought if I just loved her hard enough, fiercely enough, it would shield her from everything. I was wrong. The first bruise showed up on Mira's arm just below her tiny elbow. I noticed it during a diaper change. A small, dull purple spot no bigger than a dime. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I bumped her during the night. Maybe I held her too tight when she cried. When I showed Darren, he didn't even look up from his phone. She probably hit her toy bar. Babies do weird things. Don't overthink it. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But something in his voice, flat, tired, cold, made my stomach twist. A week later, there was another mark, this time on her back, near her shoulder blade. It looked deeper, darker. I knew I hadn't caused it. My mother saw it too. "She might need a pediatrician to check her out," Mom said gently. "It doesn't look normal." Darren got angry when I mentioned it. He said I was accusing him of something. I told him no, I was just worried. He walked out of the house and didn't come back until midnight. I waited in the nursery, rocking Mira, listening to every car that passed. When he came home, he smelled like whiskey and cologne. He didn't say a word, just grabbed a pillow and went to the guest room. The next morning, I found the baby monitor unplugged. That was when something in me started to shift. Fear seeped into the spaces where love used to sit. Mira had started crying more often, not her soft, whimpering cry. This was sharp, loud, desperate. I took her to the pediatrician again. No fever, no visible illness. They checked her ears, her throat, her belly. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal. One afternoon, I came home from picking up formula to find Darren sitting on the couch, Mira wailing in his arms. He was gripping her tighter than I had ever seen. His jaw was clenched, his eyes bloodshot. I rushed to take her from him. "I didn't hurt her," he said quickly, like I had already accused him. "I didn't say you did," I replied, but my voice was shaking. "She won't shut up. I can't take it anymore." I took Mira and held her close. Her crying stopped within seconds. Darren threw his hands up and walked into the kitchen. He slammed a cabinet door, then another. The sound echoed like thunder. That night, I waited until he fell asleep. I opened his gym bag, something I had never done before. Inside, beneath his sneakers and a balled-up hoodie, I found a plastic bag with 2 syringes, a burnt spoon, and a small pouch of white powder. I sat on the floor holding it, breathing hard. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt cold. I took pictures. Then I put everything back exactly the way I found it. The next day, I called the doctor's office and requested a copy of Mira's records. I started documenting everything: dates, bruises, his moods, Mira's behavior. I made a file on my laptop and saved everything in it, including screenshots of Darren's texts. One night, he messaged me from across the house. "You need to get her to stop screaming. I swear, Serena, I'm on the edge." Another said, "Maybe you're just not cut out for this." Maybe neither of us are. Still, I didn't leave. Not yet. I kept hoping he would change, hoping some part of him still cared. But each day felt darker than the one before. I tried talking to his mother, Catherine. I thought maybe she could get through to him. She came over one afternoon while Darren was at work. I showed her the bruises. She stared for a second, then said, "Baby's bruise." Don't go making a mess when you're already fragile. Fragile? I asked. You've always been overly emotional. Darren said you cry over spilled milk. Maybe you need a break. Her voice was calm, cold, rehearsed, like she was reading from a script. After she left, I sat on the floor of the nursery holding Mira and staring at the wall. I knew then I was completely alone. The final bruise came just 3 days before Mira died, a long one across her ribcage. I called the doctor. They said to bring her in the next morning. I never got the chance. That night, I went to pick up Mira's medication. I was gone 20 minutes. When I walked through the door, I knew something was wrong. The house was too quiet. I called out for Darren. No answer. Then I heard him say from the nursery, "I think something's wrong with her." I ran inside. Mira was limp in his arms. Her lips were pale, her skin hot and damp. I grabbed her and rushed to the car. We didn't wait for an ambulance. I drove through 2 red lights. I could barely breathe. At the hospital, they tried. They really did. But after 23 minutes, they stopped. Time of death, 8:47 p.m., the doctor said. I collapsed into my mother's arms. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt like my body left me. When the police came to take our statements, I told them everything. They asked about the bruises. I showed them. They asked about Darren. I told them about the syringes, the texts, the anger. They took it all seriously, but Darren had money, connections, and for a while, nothing happened. So I made sure something would. After Mira's funeral was scheduled, I stopped sleeping. Not the kind of tired where your body gives out and you crash for a few hours. The kind where your mind runs like it's on fire and your body just follows. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. Not in the hospital, not in the casket, just as she had been. Smiling in her bassinet, kicking her feet in the air, whole, safe, alive. But the truth sat heavy in my chest. I had trusted him. I had let her stay in his arms while I ran out to get medicine, and when I came home, I found my baby barely breathing. The coroner's report listed blunt force trauma to the abdomen, internal bleeding. There was no question what had happened. Only one adult had been in the house, and I had already warned the police once, but he still walked free. I watched Darren at the wake, dressed in a sleek black suit, like he was attending a networking event. His hair styled perfectly, his watch gleaming under the chapel lights. He cried at the appropriate moments, nodded when people offered condolences, and even told one woman she was fragile. We did what we could. I knew then that he thought this would pass, that he would move on and frame this as a tragedy of chance, a bad accident, a loss that just happened. I sat through the service like stone. My mother kept a hand on my back the entire time, rubbing circles into my spine like she used to when I was sick as a child. I barely felt it. Every second of that day, I was building something, a fire inside me, a resolve. The day after the funeral, I drove across town to the police department and asked for a detective by name. Officer Price had been the one who interviewed me at the hospital. He had kind eyes and a patient voice, but he also seemed frustrated by the gaps in the system. I handed him a file folder. "This is everything," I said. "I've documented it all." He opened the folder and started flipping through the pages. Photographs of Mira's bruises with dates and timestamps. Screenshots of Darren's text messages threatening to lose it if she didn't stop crying. a picture of the drug kit I'd found, taken with a timestamp on my phone, a printed copy of his failed drug test I had requested through a family friend at the clinic, notes from Mira's pediatrician visits where I had expressed concern, and finally, the voice recording of our neighbor, Mrs. Green, who had heard yelling the night of Mira's death and confirmed that she saw Darren throwing something outside in the dark. I had organized it carefully with labeled tabs and a chronological timeline. No emotion, no speculation, just facts. I knew how evidence worked. I had watched enough families try and fail to get justice. I wanted this airtight. Officer Price looked at me for a long moment. He nodded once and said, "Thank you, Serena. We're going to do everything we can." It still wasn't fast. The system doesn't move quickly, not when the abuser is clean-cut and connected. Darren's mother had hired an attorney before the funeral even ended. She told anyone who would listen that I was unstable, that Mira had always been sick, that grief had made me delusional. But I didn't yell. I didn't lash out. I let her talk. Instead, I gathered more. Copies of Darren's prescription refills, notes from therapy sessions I had started after Mira's death. Every time someone tried to plant doubt, I found a fact to plant in return. I waited quietly for the arrest warrant to be signed. The moment it was, I knew exactly when and how I wanted to deliver the truth. On the day of Mira's funeral, I packed a small white box. Inside it, I placed copies of the most undeniable evidence. His own words, the drug results, the police report, a photo of Mira's last bruises taken by the nurse on duty. I wrapped the papers in tissue and closed the lid. At the funeral, I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I sat there holding that box, clutching the only picture I had of Mira, and I listened. Darren leaned close and said, "You can always get pregnant again," like Mira had been a practice round. His mother smiled and said, "Next time, try harder." Like motherhood was a competition, I had failed. I stood. The chapel went quiet, every eye on me. I walked over to Darren, held out the box, and said, "This is yours." He opened it slowly. I watched the blood drain from his face. He didn't say a word, just sat there, frozen. Then I turned and walked down the aisle. Not fast, not dramatic, just finished. By that evening, the officers came to our home. He didn't even fight it. I think some part of him knew it was coming. I never visited him, never wrote, never answered the letters he tried to send from prison. He had taken everything from me, but I had taken back the one thing he never expected, the truth. The room was silent after I handed him the box. Not respectful silence, not grief. It was the kind of silence that swallows everything, the kind that follows something heavy being dropped into the center of a room. Darren's hands hovered over the lid. He looked confused, like I had just handed him a gift he didn't want to open. Then he peeled it back and looked inside. The papers were stacked neatly. I had chosen to place the photo on top. Mira's last hospital image, her arm bruised, her face pale, her eyes closed. I didn't want him to look away. He flinched when he saw it. His fingers shook as he pushed the photo aside and saw what followed. The printed screenshots of his texts. His name at the top of every message. Threats, blame, desperation thinly veiled as sarcasm. Lines he probably thought I would never remember, never keep. I swear, I'll snap if she keeps screaming like that. You and that baby both need to get a grip. Next was the drug test. His name was printed in black, bold letters. His results underlined, flagged in red. Cocaine, oxycodone. Alcohol above the legal limit. Taken just 5 days before Mira died. Then the police report, my statement, the coroner's summary. Photos taken at the hospital. Photographs he never saw. Images that burned themselves into my memory the night I stood in the hallway, screaming her name and watching nurses run. I stood tall as he read it. I didn't waver. I had waited for this moment with every breath I took since the night she died. Every hour I spent collecting the truth, every second I spent waiting for someone to believe me, came to this. "What is this?" he asked. His voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. It wasn't defensive. It was afraid. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Everything he needed to hear was already in that box. His mother looked over his shoulder. When she saw the drug report, her face turned hard. She reached to pull it from his hands, but I stepped back before she could. "You both stood here and blamed me," I said. You told me to try harder. You told me I could always have another child, like my daughter was replaceable." I looked at Catherine. Her mouth opened like she might object, but nothing came out. "I don't need to explain anything else. It's all there. Read it or don't. The police already have a copy." Darren stood up suddenly, the box falling from his hands, papers scattered across the floor at his feet. He took a step toward me, but someone in the pews stood up, blocking his path. Officer Price. I hadn't known he'd be there. "You need to sit back down," Officer Price said. Darren looked around. People were watching now, eyes wide. Some whispered, some gasped. I could feel their judgment shifting, see the confusion turn to understanding, disgust, recognition. They had thought we were grieving parents. Now they saw what I had seen for months. Officer Price leaned in and whispered something to Darren. I saw Darren's shoulders tense. Then he sat, slowly, quietly. I picked up the photo of Mira, the one that had landed near the altar, and tucked it back into my purse. There was no second goodbye. I had said everything I needed to. I walked down the aisle, past the flower arrangements and tear-stained pews, past people I used to know. Some tried to reach for me, to touch my shoulder or say something. I didn't stop. Outside, the sun was too bright, the air too clean, but it was the first time I could breathe fully since Mira's heart stopped beating. That night, I sat on my mother's couch while Officer Price called with the update. Darren had been arrested. The charges were being processed: child endangerment, negligence, involuntary manslaughter, possession. The list was long. He wouldn't be walking out again. 2 days later, Catherine tried to call me. I didn't pick up. I blocked the number. She left one voicemail before I did, saying that I had misunderstood everything, that Darren was under stress, that Mira had been fragile from the beginning. I deleted it without listening to the rest. A week after the arrest, I visited Mira's grave alone. I brought the stuffed lamb my mother had given her on the day she was born. I sat beside the headstone and read her the letter I had written that night after the funeral. It ended like this: "I couldn't save you. But I didn't let him walk away. This world failed you, but I didn't. Not this time." For the first time since she died, I felt something shift inside me. Not peace. That's too easy. But power. A sense that my silence had ended, and in its place stood something stronger. He had taken my daughter, but he didn't take me. And now, for the rest of his life, he would remember exactly who made him answer for it. Darren was sentenced 6 months after the funeral. 8 years. No parole for the first 5. The courtroom was cold and quiet. He didn't look at me once. Not when the judge read the charges. Not when the evidence was reviewed. Not even when the photo of Mira, bruised, broken, gone, was shown on the screen. I didn't cry in that courtroom. I had done enough crying already. That day wasn't about grief. It was about truth. It was about accountability. It was about my daughter's life being more than just a headline or a file buried in a police drawer. When they took him away in cuffs, I felt no satisfaction. Justice doesn't bring back a heartbeat, but it gives you space to breathe. It gives you ground to rebuild. After the trial, Catherine moved out of town. She never spoke to me again, not a letter, not a single word. I don't know where she went, and I don't care. The truth followed her whether she accepted it or not. I stayed. I stayed in the same little house where Mira took her first steps across the carpet, where I had written her name on the wall above her crib. I turned the nursery into a quiet room. No toys, no rattles, no bright colors. Just a shelf of her things, her photo in a frame, and a chair where I sit sometimes with the window open. In the spring, my mother and I planted a small garden out back. Daffodils, Mira's flower. She was born during a hot August, but daffodils always reminded me of her. Gentle, bright, a little defiant. The first to rise even after the coldest winters. The neighbors started bringing flowers too. They didn't say much. Most didn't know what had happened, but they knew something had. A few left notes. One said, "She mattered." Another said, "You are brave." I kept them all. People think grief is a season, something that eventually ends. It isn't. It's a second heartbeat. It's something you carry, something that changes the shape of you but never leaves. But what I want other mothers to know is this: silence will never protect your children. Hoping someone changes is not the same as being safe. Love does not erase danger. It never has. I believed him when he said he loved her. I believed him when he said he just needed rest. I believed him when he said I was imagining things. And Mira paid the price for those beliefs. I can't go back. I can't undo what happened. But I can speak now, loudly, clearly, with no shame. I joined a group for mothers of children lost to violence. I speak at shelters. I talk to nurses and therapists and law students about what it means to be ignored when you know something is wrong. And I tell them this: never underestimate a woman who has lost everything. Because if she survived that, she has already walked through fire. And if she chose to stand again, you should listen. I don't visit the prison. He writes letters sometimes. I never open them. He can live in the silence he once forced on me. He can sit with the weight of what he did without the comfort of being seen. Prison doesn't allow visitors, but even if it did, I would never bring him a piece of myself again. I live differently now. I don't rush. I don't pretend to be fine when I'm not. I keep Mira's blanket in my closet, folded with care, and every year on her birthday, I read her the same letter I wrote after her funeral. She wasn't here long, but she changed everything. And if you're watching this, if this story reached you, then she's still changing things. You can help too. If this video moved you, share it. Post it for someone who might be afraid to speak up. Leave a comment if you've walked through something similar. Let someone else know they're not alone. And subscribe to the channel if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, not buried, not silenced, not forgotten. We can't always stop the worst from happening, but we can speak it out loud. We can hold the ones responsible, and we can keep saying her name, Mira Grace. She mattered. Thank you for listening.